Percent problems, finding the percent. All right, in previous videos, we talked about two different ways of solving percent problems, percent equation and percent proportion. However, there is a quick way of finding the percent. What you can do is you can take what we call the part and what we call the whole or the base, and you can simply divide. Now make sure you divide. The part gets entered into your calculator first, that's the numerator, and then divide by the whole or base amount. That is going to give you a decimal, and you will have to convert that decimal into a percent. This is a very simple thing to do. We know that percent means out of 100. So if you move the decimal point 2 places to the right, you will change that decimal into percent form by moving the decimal point to the end of the hundredths. Now, some teachers will actually just tell you to multiply by 100. That would work too. Let's look at an example. Sabir made 24 out of 28 free throws attempted. What percent did he make? Round it to the nearest tenth of a percent. Now, I want to point out, whenever you have the words out of, something's always going to be true. To the left of the out of will be the part. To the right of the out of will be the total amount, also known as the whole amount. Some teachers call it the base. So right there, we already have the numbers we need for our division problem. So let's set up our fraction, or you can write it as a division problem if you'd like. 24, the part comes first. Divide by the total amount. In this case, that's the 28. That comes last. Enter that into your calculator. You will get this not very nice looking decimal. Notice I wrote 4 digits, and here's why. I don't have this in percent form yet. Move that decimal point 2 places to the right or multiply it by 100. That will make it 85 point something percent. Now, if we're going to round it to the nearest tenth, look at the digit to the right. Is 1 big enough to round up to 7? Obviously it's not. So that's going to be 85.7%. Now, yes, you could set this up percent equation style. You could set this up percent proportion style. They both work. But if you want the quickest way, then I recommend using the strategy that I just taught you. Now, since we're talking about how to find the percent, we should also talk about how to find what is called the percent of change. Sometimes it's called the percent of increase. Sometimes it's called the percent of decrease. This is the idea of having some kind of original amount increasing or decreasing to get to a newer amount. And when you need to find the percent of change, there's basically 2 things you do. You'll start by finding the amount of change, and then you will then make that a percent. Now, let me give you more details. To find the amount of change, you will do a simple subtraction. Take the new amount, subtract away the old amount. Then, once you get that amount of change, you will take it as your part, as your numerator, and divide it by the original amount, not the newer amount. It's very important that your base, your whole amount, your denominator, is the original amount. If you make it the newer amount, then you're not going to find the percent of change from the original to get to the new. That's why the denominator must be the original. So divide, that'll obviously give you a decimal. Move it 2 places to the right or times by 100, and that will make it in percent form. All right, let's look at a couple of examples, starting with this one. The population went from 2,136 students to 2,049 students. Find the percent of change. Round it to the nearest tenth of a percent. All right, first thing we're going to do is find the amount of change. We're going to subtract. So we had 2,049 was the newer amount. The original was 2,136. That's going to mean it dropped. It went down 87 students. Now, I got good news for you. If you accidentally subtract in the wrong order, it's not the end of the world. Because believe it or not, when I set up my fraction, I am going to drop any negatives. So we're actually doing what is called the absolute difference, which means absolute value. So negatives are going to get dropped no matter what. What is your denominator? We talked about, and I have it highlighted here on your screen, it needs to be the original amount. So on this problem, what was the original amount? It went from 2,136 students. Where you come from is the original amount. Now, I'm not going to guarantee every word problem has that word from, but a lot of them will. All right, let's divide in our calculator. that is going to give you 0.04073, right at least 4 digits. Because not only are you going to move it 2 places to the right or take it times 100 to get it in percent form, but if you're going to round to the nearest tenth, you need not just the 0, but you also need the 7, so you will know how to round that 0. 7 is 5 or more, so the 0 will round up, and that's why it is a 4.1% decrease. Let's look at one more example. The table shows the average cost of video games through the years, including a prediction for 2025. Full disclosure, I am making this video in 2023, so I'm kind of predicting that the average cost in 2025 it will be $70. In fact, some video games are costing that right now. Let me go back to the word problem. If the predicted average cost for 2025 ends up being correct, what is the percent of increase in the average cost from 2005 to 2025? Okay, it's very important that you read what the problem wants. It wants it from the years 2005 to 2025. So, from those amounts, you can see it went up by $10. So that's our amount of change. That's what we would get if we take 70 minus 60. Remember, the amount of change will be your numerator. You will divide by the original amount. If it came from 2005, then 2005's average cost of $60 is the original amount. It's where it came from. All right, take 10 divided by 60 in your calculator. You will get 0.16, and the 6 repeats. So when I move that decimal point 2 places to the right, the 6 continues to repeat. So it's 16.6 repeating percent, and this was an increase because obviously the average cost continues to go up.